Good morning, and welcome to the Africa Weekly Talk. Today's subject on the docket is Africa's humongous debt crisis and the economic ticking time bomb that is about to disrupt the current socio-economic development of African countries because of bad governance, bad fiscal and monetary policies by these various African governments, which leads to the old adage and saying of chickens coming home to roost. But today's subject has to do with the current situation going on in Kenya, the financial economic crisis that Kenya is going through right now, which led to President William Ruto's government decision to pass a legislation to increase taxes on basic human amenities and services on the citizens of Kenya. Talking about taxes on bread, sanitary pads, diapers, cooking oil, and so on and so forth. And it is out of this legislation that was passed by the Parliament of Kenya that also led to these deadly protests and demonstrations by the citizens, the brave men and women of Kenya, to denounce and challenge the corrupt government's decision of imposing these higher taxes on their fellow citizens. So fellas, let's go ahead and hear what CNN has to say with regards to this tax increases and the protest that took place in Kenya just last week. So let's go ahead and see and watch the video of what happened with regards to this situation. And I'll come back and dissect this whole thing. So let's go ahead and hear it. Let's go ahead and hear what these people have to say, CNN's report on this issue.
Following breaking news out of Kenya, a demonstration by people angry over planned tax hikes has turned deadly. Look at this video. Protesters have breached the Parliament building and smoke has been billowing from its windows. 5 people are reported dead, dozens injured. CNN crews have witnessed police firing live rounds at the protesters in the streets.
In Nairobi, in Kenya, the city is reeling from a day of chaos and violence. Protesters have been clashing with police. The protesters are angry over proposed tax increases and the rising cost of living under President William Ruto. Earlier, demonstrators stormed Parliament and lawmakers were discussing a controversial new finance bill. Other buildings, including Nairobi City Hall, were also set ablaze. Our teams on the ground, CNN teams, have seen police firing live rounds into the crowd, as well as using tear gas and water cannons. We know of 5 people so far killed, and dozens of people have been injured, according to the rights groups in the area. The President, William Ruto, is expected to address Kenya in just a moment. He's going to speak to the nation. Larry Madowo is in Nairobi. This seems to be deteriorating, despite the best efforts, if you will, of the president to say he'll meet protesters. He's willing to listen, but things that they're not listening or not, and things are getting worse.
Things did get out of hand today, Richard, that's for sure. These protesters had called for 7 days of rage, and today was supposed to be a day of a total shutdown. And they did succeed in shutting down Nairobi, one of Africa's busiest capitals, reduced to just violence, looting, and tear gas and water cannon. For most of the day, it felt like a war zone. And these are the residue of the police that are still left here, making sure that no protesters come back at night and try and access Parliament again, because they did get to the floor of the National Assembly earlier. They did burn a part of this back here is City Hall. This is the office of the governor of the Nairobi City County that was set ablaze in two different sections. There's a fire that claimed one car outside. There's a shell of that that's still out there. And we're expecting this statement from President William Ruto any moment now. It's in this hour that the statement is supposed to happen. And he's speaking on the backdrop of this security presence where hundreds of police officers were trying to protect Kenya's parliament, and protesters still made it their way inside there. Police having to use live rounds, and at least 5 people killed as a result of that. But also take a look at this scene over here, Richard. This is Carrefour Market. It's one of the major stores here in Nairobi. It was vandalized.
Let me interrupt you there. Forgive me. We're going to go now to President Ruto, who is speaking. Let's have a listen to what the president says.
Institutions. An otherwise legitimate expression of the fundamental rights and freedoms of assembly, demonstration, picketing, and petitioning of public authorities by a section of law-abiding citizens of the Republic of Kenya was infiltrated and hijacked by a group of organized criminals. Most regrettably, today's attack on Kenya's constitutional order has resulted in the loss of lives, also destruction of property and desecration of institutions and emblems of our sovereignty. Today's events mark a critical turning point on how we respond to grave threats to our national security. I assure the nation that the government has mobilized all resources at the nation's disposal to ensure that a situation of this nature will not recur again at whatever cost. I thank our security officers who were on duty today for applying themselves to the best of their abilities in the defense of Kenya and its people.
All right, fellas. So now you heard what the president of Kenya, William Zakayo Ruto, has to say with regards to the situation that is currently going on in Kenya. But fellas, let's cut straight to the chase and dive into this unfortunate crisis that have also led to loss of life. I mean, talking about young men and women, heroic young men and women of Kenya, who went onto the streets of Kenya to demonstrate and protest against their corrupt government decision to increase taxes on basic goods in their country. And it is out of these protests also that led to the death of these young, brave men and women. According to the current data, about 20 people have so far died in these protests. And let's not let this death go in vain. I hope the citizens of Kenya will come together and honor these brave young men and women with a monument because they deserve it. They really deserve it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to talk to some friends of mine from Kenya and talk to them about it in order to build a monument to honor these young men and women, brave men and women who gave their life to their fellow citizens of Kenya for economic justice that every citizen of Kenya is going to benefit from. It is unfortunate that it has to get to this point. But now the question is, how did it get to this point with the situation going on in Kenya? And Kenya is not the only place that is going through this. It's just a matter of time that other African countries will also have to go through this same situation that is going on in Kenya. And deservedly so too. All African youth have to now rise up and challenge their governments who are going around borrowing and borrowing and borrowing tons of money, indebting them to the level that is going to make their livelihood miserable in the near future. I understand these youth, the so-called Gen Zs, why they are angry. And they have every right to be angry. At the end of the day, this indebtedness by their African governments is going to be paid by their toil and hard work. These old men in offices right now, taking all these debts on their citizens, wouldn't be around to pay for these debts. So it's these young men and women who are going to pay for these debts. So I applaud these young, brave men and women of Kenya for standing up against their corrupt government and challenging them on this issue. Because now, these members of parliament and President William Zakayo Ruto have to go back to the drawing board and decide the feasible, better way of finding a solution to the problem that has been created by these bad political governments in Africa. I did a program about a year ago when Sri Lanka's, the Rajapaksa family, having borrowed so much money from China and IMF, basically bankrupted Sri Lanka. So the citizens of Sri Lanka have to go on the streets, just like what is happening in Kenya today, to protest higher standard of living, higher prices on basic goods and services in that country. And all came about because of the bad fiscal and monetary policies and the corrupt governments of the Rajapaksa family, enriching themselves and their crony capitalist friends in Sri Lanka. And when I did that program last year, I talked about it's just a matter of time. It's about a matter of time that this same thing is going to start trickling down on the continent of Africa. Because this same thing that was going on in Sri Lanka are also being done on the African continent by these African governments. And Lord and behold, it started with Kenya. And it's not just going to be Kenya. It's not just going to be Kenya, because it's going to happen on almost every African country, because most of these African countries are in serious debt crisis. As a matter of fact, according to an economic analyst, that analysis that was done by the World Bank, I think, and IMF as well, about 80% of Africa's GDP goes to service their debts to either IMF, China, and other creditors around the world. So GDP ratio to debt on the African continent is about 80%. And to some extent, even in some countries, it goes all the way to about 100%. I mean, fellas, give me a break. You give me a break. You talk about GDP to debt ratio in Africa. On average, it's about 80–85%. I mean, come on, fellows. How much more do you have to indebt your own citizens for them to rise up against this foolishness? And this goes down to this borrowing, where the money that is being borrowed is not invested in the right areas of their economies. And that's where the problem is. There's nothing wrong to borrow. There is bad debt and good debt. But these African governments have resorted to bad debt because of corruption and bad governance. Look at their fiscal and monetary policies. When they borrow these tons of money from China, IMF, World Bank, and other donors, they don't put this money that is supposed to go and invest in their economies in the areas, the critical areas, that is going to bring in needed revenue to cover these debts that they have borrowed. But rather, they will invest in stupid things, invest in things that will just go and satisfy their crony capitalist friends. So in the end, whatever investment that they do, they are not able to get enough revenue out of that foolish investments that they have done to cover the loans that they have gone to collect from these institutions. And in the end, they look at their citizens as suckers. So we can come back and impose more taxes and more taxes and more taxes on their fellow citizens. And it is out of these liberal economists at the IMF and the World Bank who always believe in higher taxes, because that's what they always preach. They always preach about higher taxes in Western countries. But Western countries have totally different economies from Africa. Africa is a third world country, fellows. Africans are still poor. How much more taxes can you impose on your citizens for them to be able to survive, to even buy basic food to put on their table? So it is unfortunate. It is unfortunate. I mean, this is coming from a very president who was flying high just about a month ago, coming to the United States of America, having a state dinner for him. And when he was questioned about the cost of flying a private jet to America, William Zakayo Ruto said that that cost was covered by Friends of Kenya. The cost of his flight was covered by Friends of Kenya. That's what he said. And who are these Friends of Kenya? These are the same crony capitalist friends that benefited and continue to benefit from this corrupt money that when they take as loans, they channel these loans to the projects and contracts to their friends, family, and businesses. So they are the very ones who are going to cover his luxurious lifestyle in Kenya, whilst everybody else is suffering. So the Friends of Kenyans that covered his, flight all over the world should also now go and cover the debt then, because they are the ones who have benefited from it. Because at the end of the day, most of these borrowing that most of these governments are taking into their countries are going to these crony capitalists and their family business. They are channeling this money into their crony capitalist family businesses. It's not going to help the citizens of Kenya, and that is the misguided policies of African governments. There's nothing wrong to borrow money. It's just like anybody else. If you set up a business, you go to the bank to take loans, to invest into the business. So whatever you invest in that business, you take that money and pay back that loan. It's that simple. It's not that complicated. But when these guys borrow this money, they don't invest in the right channels on their economies. Because at the end of the day, they have to steal some of their money. So they invest in their crony capitalist and family businesses so that they can get money in that area as well. And out of that misguided investment and fiscal and monetary policies of these governments end up not being able to get enough revenue to cover these debts and loans that they have gone to borrow. And that is that simple. It's nothing complicated. And this is the problem that most African countries face. I mean, a country like Ghana, just quite recently, the government of Ghana was funding what they call National Cathedral. I mean, that thing is just still underground or something. I mean, this government assigned a budget and assigned some money for the construction of a cathedral. Are you kidding me? I mean, you have a country that is in the economic crisis, and the government takes money to go and build a goddamn National Cathedral. National Cathedral. When you have key areas in your economy that you need to put the money into. But rather, they're going to invest in some stupid-ass National Cathedral. And what is that National Cathedral going to do for the citizens of Ghana? What is that going to do for them? I mean, look at Yamoussoukro. I remember about 30-something years ago, 1990 or 1989, when Houphouët Boigny, then the president of Ivory Coast, built the biggest basilica in the world. I mean, the biggest basilica in the world is in Yamoussoukro, Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire. That's where it is. It's sitting in Yamoussoukro, empty. No tourists, nobody going down there. And at that time, Houphouët Boigny, when asked about it, said it cost about $100 million US. I mean, this was 1986. and it cost 100 million US dollars. And one question, he said it was his own money. Where did Ofe get 100 million US dollars? I mean, fellows, so he built that thing, and that thing has been sitting down there for 30-something years. And even the country doesn't have enough money to even take care of the place. So that was a wasted money. Wasted 100 million US dollars in 1986. Do you know what that could have done in the socioeconomic development of Cote d'Ivoire today? But it was wasted because of misguided fiscal and monetary policy by these corrupt African governments. So I stand with the people of Kenya. I stand with them to protest and to force their government to be accountable for every penny that they have borrowed. Because at the end of the day, fellows, all these debts that are being taken by African governments are debts that our children and the youth have to work and pay for these debts. It is not these old men sitting in office who are going to pay for these debts. It's the children and the youth. So the youth have every right to demand accountability. And I'm very happy these youth did that. The only unfortunate thing about it is that it ended up in the loss of life, as well as also some people breaking into the parliament and tearing the parliament down and all that stuff. I mean, that was uncalled for, because you destroying the same properties that belongs to the country that you have to use money to go and repair. So that was the wrong thing to do. I don't believe in destruction of properties when it comes to protest. I believe in peaceful protest. And when things like this happen, you always have the government. Corrupt government will always use those few criminal elements that will hijack the protest. In some cases, even some of these criminal elements are part of the political class or political parties people that they use to hijack these protests, to basically to discredit the genuine protest by the people. And I remember what happened in Nigeria a couple of years ago, the NSAS protest at Lekki. We all know what happened when some people that the government claimed were criminal elements joined the protest. And in the end, the government has to use deadly force because they claim at that time that these criminal elements have to be taken care of. So they use deadly force against peaceful protesters. So this is nothing new. You always hear governments in corrupt dictatorial countries always use criminal elements as an excuse to shut down peaceful protest. In some cases, I believe even some of these criminal elements are infiltrated by the same very government people. It's their own people that sometimes they use to infiltrate, so they can use as a means to justify the use of force, deadly force against their own fellow citizens. So I wouldn't be surprised if these so-called criminal elements, if infiltrants were part of the government. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not saying it is, but I wouldn't be surprised it is. But because this is an old tactics, fellows. This is an old tactics. This thing goes way back. It's nothing new. When dictatorial governments always use criminal elements to infiltrate peaceful protests in order for them to use that as the justification of using deadly force against the peaceful protesters. So I stand with the young youth and brave women and men of Kenya. And I hope this becomes a lesson to other African children, youth, young men and women all across the continent. It's about time the youth of Africa, you take back your countries. It's about time, because this indebtedness is going to be on your backs. It's going to be on your toil. So you have every right to force your governments to stop this unnecessary, stupid borrowing that is crippling the African continent, that is destroying the African economy, that is making your lives harder and harder every damn day. This borrowing is what is making life very difficult for African citizens on that continent. Like I stated earlier, there's nothing wrong to borrow money. We have what we call bad debt and good debt. The most important aspect of borrowing is what you use that money that you borrow to do. But if you have a corrupt government who have a misguided fiscal and monetary policy in your various African countries, when they borrow this money, they don't give a damn about the citizens of that country. I mean, I came about a study that was done about some 5 years ago. And this analysis showed that most African countries' infrastructure projects that were being done by these Chinese companies. And some of these same projects that had also been done in Asia and part of China, and they were looking at the cost of these projects that was done in China and other parts of Asia and comparing it to the cost of this same project in Africa. Africans were paying 4 or 5 times more than what it cost these same contractors to build in other parts of the world. How come? How come that Africans have to pay that much more in projects that it costs less to do in Asia and other parts of the world? It's all because of the corrupt government. Because at the end of the day, they have to set it up to get their cuts. So when they borrow this money and they bring in these contractors from overseas, they have to find a way to inflate the cost of the project so that they can get cut or steal money out of that project. So that's the saddest truth, fellows. These leaders of Africa are not there to help develop Africa. That's unfortunate too. But I'm very happy that the citizens of Kenya have finally decided this is not about religion. This is not about tribes and all that stuff. This is not about Kikuyu against the Lao and so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, they came to realize when they increase the price of bread, when they increase the price of diaper, when they increase the price of sanitary pads and stuff for women, it doesn't affect whether you are from the Kikuyu tribe or you are from the Lao tribe or you are from whatever tribe, or whether you're a Christian or a Muslim. At the end of the day, you are all in the same goddamn boat. So it affects every damn body in that country. And it is out of that united all the citizens of Kenya to stand up against these tax increases because it affected everybody. And I hope other African citizens across the continent will learn from it so that they don't get used by these corrupt politicians in their various countries where they use divide and conquer to divide them, to disrupt their own thinking about very basic things that goes to benefit the citizens. They will use religion and use tribalism in order to disrupt their own citizens so that people go in there thinking about, oh, he's the president of my country and he's from my own area, or he's my tribe, or he's a Christian, I'm a Christian, and so all that BS. No, it's about time you put all that stuff aside. Put that goddamn stuff in the trash and focus on what is good in the interest of the citizens of your various African countries. That is what you guys have to fight for. And that is what the brave young men and women of Kenya showed the whole world this past week. That at the end of the day, it was about common interest of the citizens of Kenya. And that is what they did. And at the end, they have to back down on this. And they don't have to stop there. They don't have to stop there. They have to make sure that the level of corruption, that these corrupt politicians have been taking advantage of their fellow citizens in this on the continent for too long. For too long. These corrupt politicians have been embezzling, stealing from your coffers. And go and look at their resources. Most of these guys come to office with nothing. 5-4 years in office, all of a sudden they are worth millions of dollars. Where did they get that money from? If they knew how to make money, if they knew how to invest their money and make money, how come that they didn't make that money before they became politicians? How come that they didn't use that brain to make that money before they became politicians? Because they don't know how to make money. They only believe in stealing from the governments of your various African countries. That's what they are. They are a bunch of thieves. These guys don't know how to work hard and invest and establish businesses. They don't. Because every person who knows how to do that, I bet you wouldn't kill him or herself to get into politics in Africa. But because they don't know how to do that, the only way they see as a way to become successful financially in their life is to go to politics and steal the resources of their various African countries. That is what these people believe in. But now, the Kenyan citizens have made it clear, we ain't taking it no more. We ain't taking it no more. You want to increase taxes on us. You think we are suckers. You use that money, spend it lavishly. Raise your salaries. Buy luxury cars for yourselves. And then we, the citizens, the suckers, have to come and pay for you, your livelihood, your lifestyle, your corrupt lifestyle. No. They ain't taking it no more. It's about time other African citizens in the various African countries take this same playbook. Take this same playbook and don't let your corrupt politicians abuse you guys and take you for granted. They've been taking Africa for far too long for granted, fellows. They've been taking our citizens for far too long for granted for too long. I mean, these guys are broad daylight robbers. Monetary robbers. Broad daylight. Robbing their citizens and making life harder and harder and harder every goddamn day for their fellow citizens. They don't even have conscience. They don't even have conscience. Go to most of your countries, fellows. Schools. Some of these kids even study under trees in this modern day. You go to African countries and some of these kids study under trees. I mean, are you kidding me? Meanwhile, you have your politicians and your legislators passing bills to spend millions of dollars on luxury vehicles for themselves. I mean, you got to blame yourselves too. You got to blame yourselves. Because how in the world you're going to allow your own politicians, the people that you elect into office, to abuse you to that level? I mean, it's unfortunate. You got to wake up. You got to wake up. It's about time. And I hope the youth all across the continent will not stop with just Kenya. Move along. Force changes. It is only you. You are the only ones who can force these changes in your various African countries. Nobody is going to come to your various African countries to change anything for you. At the end of the day, like I stated earlier, all these debts, all this borrowing from China, IMF, and all these creditors are going to be on your backs. Children that are 5 years old, 1-year-old kids, 10-year-old, and even some of them have not been born yet. They are the ones who are going to incur all this debt. So it is the right thing for you, the youth, to stand up and challenge these borrowing. You don't have to let these people get away with it. At the end of the day, they have paved the way for their children. A lot of these corrupt politicians, guess what? They send their children to schools in Europe and America. When they are sick, they send their children and themselves to Europe and America to cure themselves. With your money. With your money. Not their own goddamn money. With your money. So that is why you people have to stand up against these things. It is your money that they use to finance the education of their children. They use that money also to finance their own health well-being when they come to Europe or go to America for healthcare. Because of you guys. Because they think you guys are a bunch of suckers. But like I said, the chickens are coming home to roost. And now the African youth have to rise up and challenge these authorities. All you have to do is peaceful protest. All you have to do is peaceful protest. You don't have to do that much. Just go on the street and protest all these bad laws and these bad government policies that are taking place in your various African countries. That is all you guys have to do. At the end of the day, they will find ways and means, like I said, to infiltrate some of these peaceful protests, to justify their evil cruelty against their own fellow citizens. That is what they do. It's an old playbook. This thing goes back. So they always use that playbook, but we live in a different world today. What is happening in Kenya 30 years, 40 years ago, without social media, would not have been heard by the world. But we live in a modern world. All it takes is one person with a camera, cell phone camera, to record, and it blows up all across the world. And they know that. So they cannot go about slaughtering people like they used to do back in the day anymore. So now they are very wary of that. So you people use your constitutional rights to protest, to challenge the policies that are going to affect your livelihood in the near future. And that is what is happening on the continent. These leaders of Africa today are destroying your welfare. And it's about time all the youth in various African countries stand up and protest the government policies that are undermining the economic prosperity of all of you in your various African countries. So I start with the brave men and young women of Kenya. I applaud them. Kudos to them. It's very unfortunate that in the end, some of these people have to lose their lives. That is the saddest truth about all of this. But in everything that we do in this world also, we have to remember some people have to sacrifice for others to benefit from it. As much as it's so sad to hear of the death of these heroic young men and women, let's not make their death in vain. We got to come together, the people of Kenya, and try and build a monument to honor these young, brave men and women who put their lives on the line for the citizens of Kenya. And that is what these young men and women did for you guys in Kenya. So you guys come out and find a monument and build a monument for these men and women that lost their lives. Because it's out of them that hopefully is going to create a better life for future generations of Kenya. So fellows, it is unfortunate that Africa in this modern era still have to go through this. But like I've stated and continue to say, we don't have leaders in Africa who have our countries at heart. We don't have leaders who want to see Africa to be the great Africa that is supposed to be. Unfortunately, we have corrupt, bad leaders who only think of themselves and their crony capitalist friends and families. By the end of the day also, it is up to we, the citizens of that continent, because it is we, the citizens, who have the power. These leaders and parliamentarians and congressmen and whatever you want to call them, they are a bunch of chickens. They are a bunch of chickens down there. They don't have guts. They're just there because we put them there. And it is only through us also who can bring the changes, the necessary changes that will also move Africa forward to become a great continent. So fellas, if it's Sunday, it's the Africa Weekly Talk. God bless you guys and have a great week. Peace and love. And thank you, and share this video. And I appreciate your help and your listening to this video every week. God bless you guys and have a great week. Thank you and peace and love.